I'm here with Margie, and we're going to be talking about high performance leadership. And we're going to talk through a couple of things as well about how to implement a bit of high performance leadership as well, because we're going to talk about meetings, aren't we? And how to have high performance meetings, or meetings that you can get something from. Margie, where can people find you?
They can find me at www.olsonconsulting.com. Olson has a silent E, OLESON dash consulting. You'll find all kinds of resources out there. And then I post daily free resources on LinkedIn, Margie Olson, OLESON.
Excellent. So, Margie, just give us a brief history about how you've got where you are today.
Sure. So I was in corporate America for 30 years and was surprised to find that no matter which industry I was in, no matter what size of company or type of company, for profit, nonprofit, government, the issues around how people work together and how leaders can lead and how teams can be successful were similar, and they were struggling. There are just a lot of challenges. And I would say that we don't talk about it openly the way that we talk openly about other issues that we have. People seem to have the impression that they're supposed to just work it out, that leadership is going to be hit or miss, and we're just on the hook for it ourselves. And I was really surprised by that and went back to college and earned a doctorate in organization development. The way you might take apart the toaster or look under the hood, I wanted to understand organizations. And I was very surprised to learn that what we know about how to be a successful leader, how to lead a successful leadership team, we had known for 3 decades at that point. Now
Yeah.
we're at 40 years. So then I wanted to understand what was missing, built my research around understanding what is missing for leaders in organizations to be able to have those strengths and have that up and running. And it's really about execution. There are just a few reasons why leaders are struggling. And it starts with they're not telling each other that they're struggling. They may not even be telling themselves that they're struggling. But when you look at indicators like your meetings are terrible, like you have people that are gossiping and complaining to each other on your leadership team rather than coming to you. They are not working together to solve problems. They're coming to you for that, and they're going back to their teams and possibly rowing in a different direction. And so when you have those issues going on, those can all be addressed by intentionally developing as a leader and building your leadership team in a methodical way with the right building blocks and the right processes.
So I know that in my notes when we met, um, you talked about the need to be able to read a room. So talk to us about that.
So I grew up naturally being able to read a room, very chaotic childhood, moved every year, always was in new schools, developed the art of being able to know who was who pretty quickly because I was always having to do that. And what I learned coming up through corporate America and then earning my doctorate and doing all of that research and having my own development, going to therapy, whatever, is that one of the greatest strategies or skills that a leader can have is self-awareness. And self-awareness, the way I define it is, if when I'm self-aware, I understand the impact my behavior and communication has on others, and I understand the impact of the behavior and communication of others on me. And so and you can grow your self-awareness through a variety of ways. One of them literally is going to therapy. Another is journaling. Another is being in a part of a group, and your adult development, moving through and building resiliency and being open and honest about your issues and then addressing them. That all grows self-awareness. So in my program, I've launched Top Team Accelerator, and part of the first pillar of it, which is called teamwork, is to meet a leader and a leadership team wherever they are. And then from there, grow their self-awareness in very methodical ways using activities and conversations and practice. And when you do that, you start to develop that skill for looking around and being able to read a room as well. It's not just a particular type of personality that's good at it, although some people are more natural at it, but you can grow that just by doing your self-awareness work and developing what I call team awareness. We as a team should have this collective awareness where we realize when somebody is struggling, or we realize when the boats aren't going in the right direction, or we can sense that something is off and we need to focus on that rather than what we normally were going to come together for. So that can all be learned and developed, but you have to have time and space in your day. And most leaders are putting out fires, and they are doing crisis management, and they think, I don't have the time right now. I'll get to it later. And later never comes. So we work on taking a little bit of time and space, learning the right things to learn, the short list of ways to put these activities in place, and then practice and monitor. I observe and help you. And then finally, you can make some of these changes stick that you've tried before and they just didn't happen up to now.
And so what can we do in terms of, in your previous point when you talked about um, there's a gap in leadership? What can we do to actually recognize that? Because the number one thing that people come onto this podcast and say the number one thing that you need to have is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I've had number of people over the last 12, 18 months that have said that. So what is it that we can do to basically understand and research on that gap of leadership?
Mm-hmm. So my Top Team Accelerator has 4 pillars. The first one is teamwork. And one of the things that we learn and develop as for the leader and the leadership team is they start to have practice at having more real conversations. And so I developed teamwork with these very specific activities. First, we do some assessments. We fix the structure of the team. We fix their meetings right away. You want to fix your meetings right away because everything else you do might be in a meeting. And so if you're trying to make other changes, have other benefits, other improvements, you got to have your interactions with each other to be highly successful. When your interactions start to improve, you're actually building self-awareness. When you go after intentionally having interactions that are more authentic, that are more focused on the right things with the right people, but not smoothing it over or trying to cover up or having the meeting before the meeting or the meeting after the meeting. When you start to get the habits where, so let's say I'm a leader and there's a 6-person leadership team, the 7 of us learn maybe for the first time to be open with each other and to not get bogged down with politics and to not feel like we have to sugarcoat something. I once worked with a 4-person leadership team, a very small leadership team that each had their own team, and they were doing a national rollout, and they were very cordial. Good friends, actually. They would get together for lunches and celebrate birthdays. And they'd been doing this rollout for almost a year. And they brought me in. They weren't gaining traction, and they were blaming the market or the employees, or this is not the right rollout. We picked the wrong transformation and we got to tell leaders. And when I came in and we did a little bit of assessing and we started to have some conversations that were targeted and strategic, we're not just going to have all the conversations. We're going to have the ones that are the right ones for right now. And once we started having those conversations, each of the 4 recognized they had a very different view of what the transformation was, what was going to take to roll it out, and how it was going. They sat side by side. This is when we were still not remote. They sat side by side for a year and didn't know that they were telling their own teams a different story, didn't know that they were complaining and about things that they didn't, their colleagues didn't even realize they had. So a few of them got a little teary-eyed. We were laughing. They were just really struck by how they could be together so often and have it not be effective. Once you start having the right kind of meetings, once you start having the right kind of conversations, then you actually are developing your own emotional awareness, so communication awareness. And I will say the other thing we do in my program that is different, I think, than what I've experienced with other types of programs or consultants is we do the actual work, and we start with what is the most important, let's say, element for a particular team is the leader has the goals, and the teams need to be going in the direction of the leader's goals. So when you're having meetings and you're not talking about those goals, you're talking about something over here, or you're talking about something that is a mile away, or it's the past, it's operations from before, it's not even what's going to lead to the goals right now. Your own emotional growth is stunted because you're not talking about the things that are the most important. And some people can kind of feel it on a gut level. Some people sitting on your team right now, they actually know that. They're good at this. Others don't, and they're not going to say anything. So when you start having the right conversations to be strategic and have the interactions that lead to the leader achieving the goals and making mistakes and failing fast and doing trial and error, you increase your self-awareness and your ability to have team awareness. And then I do the kind of assessments that I think give the right kind of information for people to know a little bit more about themselves, but especially be able to talk to each other. And quite quickly, what happens, because it starts to feel contagious, is the inauthentic conversations go down, the poor performing meetings go down, and you can quite quickly make changes once you start having those better interactions, and it starts to snowball, which is a fantastic way to make change quickly and effectively.
So so let's talk about meetings and how we can fix them. I was amazed that you said it was an $85 billion problem in the US.
Says Forbes. And I would say it's probably even higher if you take into consideration all the things that you're going after. This is a global issue. And we had this issue long before we were remote. As a matter of fact, when I was studying for my, doing my research for my doctorate, at that time, virtual teams were as successful as in-person teams, probably because they were more intentional about being a team. So
Yeah.
you've got in-person teams that are just coming to meetings. They're just kind of hanging out, being in meetings.
It's a good
What
day.
is
It's a good way to fill the day, though, isn't it?
It's a great way to fill the day. It's also a great way to not have to get things done because you might not need to be in that meeting. So
Yeah.
it's not a meeting where you're looked to for where there's expectations for your delivery or your contributions. So you can meatloaf. You can be a meatloaf.
Yeah.
And so,
A
but
meatloaf.
the what's fascinating is what we need to do to fix our meetings. You already know. So everyone within the sound of my voice has probably heard 3 or 4 things that you need to do to fix your meetings. So why are your meetings still struggling? So I'll tell you what the reason why you're struggling, and then I'll talk about how to fix your meetings.
Yep.
So the reason you're struggling is because you have those other issues going on. And those other issues, lack of clarity. This team did not have the same view of where they were headed and how they were going to get there. Lack of alignment. You're not interacting with each other and getting all the boats to row in the same direction. You're kind of off going this way and that way, and nobody knows necessarily how to figure out that where we're each at the same time. So when you don't have those things, you have the same issues going to get in the way of making a change. So I would like to remind everyone that 99.9% of what we do every day is autopilot. The brain is keeping us alive. It's keeping us available for opportunities. And so it likes all the habits you already have. It really doesn't like anything new. It's going to deal with something new, but it really needs you to just do what's already familiar because it knows how to do that. So as a leader throughout the day, those are your habits. It may seem odd to think of it that way. We think of the way we go to the gym or work out as a habit. We think about what we eat as a habit. We think about how often we call someone or do our part in a two-person connection. But I don't know if leaders realize that throughout the day, almost everything you're doing is just familiar. It's habits. It's autopilot. So when you're trying to make a better meeting, you would have to interrupt that process, interrupt those patterns. But if you don't know how to do that, and if you haven't had success in other parts of your life with that or other areas of your leadership, you're going to fall back. James Clear with Atomic Habits says, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our habits. So a few things you need to have for a high-performing meeting. Number one, you need to have the right people there for the right conversations. And in order to do that, you need to separate out your tactical meetings where you're getting the day-to-day done from your strategic meetings.
Yep.
So all of these issues that we have right now that seem really unable to address, like 5 generations in the workplace, like coming off of a global pandemic, like do we do hybrid, in-person, remote, like diversity and inclusion as a success measure, all of these different changes, the marketplace and the economy, the global world, those changes you're not able to get to because you don't have time because you're always fighting fires and dealing with the day-to-day. Those issues can be solved for your company. I'm not asking you to solve global supply chain for everyone, but you can work on it for yourself when you can take time away from the firefighting, time away from the day-to-day. And you do that best by separating out the day-to-day operations from the strategic. And the discipline for that means when you're in a tactical conversation, so you have a weekly tactical meeting and somebody brings up something strategic, we need to talk about our workforce. We need to do some hiring. Someone could say, that sounds like a strategic conversation. Let's get that on the list, and then we'll move that into our next strategic meeting. Or you're having a strategic meeting. You've gone to 2 hours where you're just going to talk about supply chain, or you're just going to talk about your relocation. You're now moving from one location to another, and you're going to have a strategic conversation about that. And somebody brings up some of the day-to-day fires. Imagine getting bogged down for 20 minutes talking about those fires, which are very important, but you don't even have the right people in the conversation. And now you've missed 20 minutes of having your strategic conversation, which was very important as well. So separating out the strategy from the tactical, and then insisting that you have the right people in the right conversation. So if you suffer from fear of missing out, if you've got people in your meetings because of FOMO or because of politics or just because of habits, we've always done it this way, you do not want to uninvite somebody. They're going to feel weird. It's not going to go over well. Then you've got people in your meetings who aren't adding to the conversation. They may even be taking you down a territory that you don't need to go right now. And you inevitably have to do your meetings before the meeting or after the meeting to getting anything done. But now you've spent all that money with all those people around the virtual table having a meeting, and you didn't get anything out of it. And then people leave and they roll their eyes and they say, see, meetings are terrible. So once you have separated out strategy and tactical, and once you have started to develop the habit of being honest with each other, that you're not needed in this meeting, I'm not needed in this meeting, we're both needed over here. Once you could just start talking about it without it feeling like it's a big deal, then there's a couple very concrete things you do. Number one, at the very beginning of the meeting, you say what the agenda is. As a matter of fact, you post the agenda before so people can come prepared and know who should be there. But you don't start the meeting by saying, what else should we put on the agenda? That sounds like a very kind thing to do. It sounds like it might even be strategic. Well, we might have something that's newer since the agenda, but that's not a good habit, because if you start adding things to the agenda, do you have the right people for those conversations, and are they ready? And do these other people need to be here for that? So number one, start with an agenda and make sure people know, and then find a way to show everyone, if you're together in a room, be documenting on a board or paper or online. If you're remote, have something, share your screen and be writing, so that everyone has the same view of not what you talked about. You don't need all those conversations down there. You want what decisions were made, what questions were asked that still need to be dealt with, and who volunteered for what. And then you end 5 minutes early and you review that. So it's a wonderful little exercise. I would recommend everybody do this little exercise. Have a couple of meetings, and at the very end, even without adding any other changes, at the very end, just reiterate what you personally thought was decided, was committed to, and was going to be followed up on. And ask people if they had the same views. And inevitably they don't, because they're inside their own head. They have a different view just because they come at it differently. Once you do the things that I just mentioned, it is a complete revolution for your meetings. But then what happens is you have to intentionally make those habits. And in order to do that, you have to keep at it. You have to put Post-it notes up, or you have to put into your agenda every time a little check-in on how are we doing our meetings. Have one of your strategic conversations be checking in on your meetings. Have somebody observe your meetings. Are you following the start with an agenda, but don't add to it? Make sure you have the right people. Stop 5 minutes before and do a clarification so that everyone is on the same page about those things that came out of it and are going to happen. Eventually you start to develop those habits, and so you fix your meetings, but one thing is still a struggle. Maybe there are some politics to deal with. Maybe there is some FOMO to deal with. Well, that's great, because now you've freed up some time. Go after that intentionally and work on that. But don't just not do all of this because there might be this challenge. Once you have freed up some time and space, you can address that challenge, and then you're rocking and rolling. And then you turn around and start teaching the people that report to you how to have better meetings, and it begins to cascade.
I was always told, by the way, Margie, that was fantastic. I love the way you described that. I was always told never to have any other business on an agenda, because of the fact that even though it's nice to ask for it, you should have actually, anything that's on the agenda, you should have sorted before the meeting and circulated. And it's a way
Yes.
that people use, AOB is a way that people use to hijack the meeting.
Correct. And what's brilliant is when you start to put these practices in place and your meetings are more high performing. First of all, your number of meetings goes down. So it actually frees up your calendar. But also, sometimes somebody's hijacking a meeting or bringing up another item that doesn't fit because they don't know where to put it. Everybody's calendars are booked. So once you free up people's calendars, you can be having conversations, and what you'll also find is sometimes it's a one time that we have meetings on our calendars that are recurring, and we're not even checking in to say, do I still need this meeting? Do we have the right people? Are we having the right conversations? I would say that $85 billion problem that Forbes talked about, I would say most of the meetings are not achieving the goals you set out, and we have everything we need to make it better. And once you do, my clients never want to go back to the old ways.
Margie, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about that. I mean, you've just shared some excellent insights, something that I think we can all learn from. Where can people find you?
So www.olson-consulting.com, you will find all kinds of resources about Top Team Accelerator, the 4 pillars for leaders to learn how to lead and lead their leadership teams, and then all kinds of resources for how other companies have brought it to life and made it happen for them.
And you're also on LinkedIn as well.
Yep. Every day posting content that's free. Margie.Olson, Oleson. Would love to talk to people.
Excellent. Margie, thank you so much